Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of you for the invitation to speak on C-272, my private member's bill. Most importantly, thanks to everyone who voted for the bill at second reading, bringing the bill here to Indu Committee. I look forward to hearing your questions and discussing the bill. As you know, the bill passed second reading with unanimous support in the House and has garnered interest and support from individuals, businesses, and environmental and technological activists from across the country and in fact internationally. I trust that you all recognize the significance of this bill and realize its potential as I have. I want to say that I am happy to discuss amendments and ways to strengthen this bill, and I hope that there is ample opportunity for me to hear your thoughts on the legislation. C-272 addresses some concerns that the Copyright Act is being used and interpreted in areas far beyond its scope. In particular, the provisions of copyright that are actually able to prevent the repair of digital devices and systems, even when nothing is being copied or distributed, and where the owner actually owns the device. The Copyright Act contains certain mechanisms that make it impossible or extremely difficult for consumers to repair their own goods. Technological protection measures, or TPMs, are used to protect the intellectual property found in devices. TPMs can inadvertently prevent repairs and can shut out independent repair shops, home DIY repairs, and replacement of simple parts. This system can even prevent repairs after the company has gone out of business, because breaking TPMs would still be illegal even if the company wasn't making the product any longer, and there were literally no other options for repair or replacement. This goes against everything that Canadians understand instinctively when they purchase something. As technology becomes more sophisticated, and with the introduction of digital systems integrated into these products, there are technological protection measures which are embedded by the Copyright Act, which can prevent any repairs, even simple ones, which should be able to be completed by consumers. If passed into law, this bill could change the repair landscape entirely. Imagine when your smart appliance breaks down. You would not have to wait for a licensed repair person with the TPM bypassing passwords or tools to come to your house. You could order the part yourself, install it yourself, or hire another company to do it for you. This keeps the control of the product in the consumer's hands and reduces the manufacturer's ability to leverage their product long after it has been sold, which is not only inappropriate, but also anti-competitive. And a case could be made for those acts to be illegal under Canada Anti-Competition Act. As a result, Canadians would not have to face the dilemma of throwing out their quality and sometimes new products as a result of a small malfunction. This would have drastic effects on our waste and would increase our ability to work efficiently with our smart devices. I'm aware that other private members' bills have been brought forward in the past to address concerns about right to repair. Please be aware that this bill is substantially different in structure and design, and that's on purpose. I've aimed to carve out a very specific and limited allowance for consumers to circumvent a TPM, but only for the purpose of diagnosis, maintenance, or repair. I'm well aware of the legislation that must be moved by the provinces to address some other components of right to repair, including availability of spare parts, mandating repair manual availability, instituting additional measures to protect consumers, and regulations on the sale of goods which do not allow for repair. The key here is that C-272 is that it's a precursor to many of these other items, because without a change to the Copyright Act, those other legislation and regulatory changes will not have their desired effect, as TPMs cannot be bypassed for repair. This bill is important because it's not a matter of if, but when this legislation will be required. Legislation for right to repair has been considered at the provincial level, is in place or being written in the EU and across multiple jurisdictions in the United States. With our shared interest of avoiding waste and keeping consumers in control of their own products, we must make room for repair. thank you for your time today, Madam Chair, and I would be happy to answer any of the committee's questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, MP May. We're happy to have you here at Indu. With that, we'll start our round of questions. Our first 6-minute round goes to MP Polyev. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. May. I've carefully read your bill, and frankly, I think you've got it right. I think there are two extremes on this in this debate. One is that the government would, as we do now under the copyright, to respect the exclusive repair rights of the vendor, and the other is to ban the vendor from applying technological protections. What you've done is you've done neither of those things. What you've done is basically remove the prohibition on circumvention technology to allow those customers who want to go to attempt to repair something themselves and to attempt to go around a technological protection measure. And by the amendment to the Copyright Act you propose, effectively, I think you're legislating the principle of willing buyer, willing seller. And I think that's where we need to be on this. Did you want to? That's more of a comment than a question. I invite your response to it.
Thank you, Mr. Polyev. I agree. This is not an overreach. This is actually my second opportunity to present a private member's bill in the House, and I learned a lot in the first go around. And when we drafted this bill, we wanted to make sure, one, it was broad. I had no delusions of grandeur that it would receive unanimous support in the House, but I was very pleased to see that. But also that it would support all Canadians, and it would be a step in the right direction. I think a lot of times private members' bills are drafted trying to get across that finish line, and when we came across this issue, very, very quickly realized that's not how this is going to work. We need to take a step forward and give the provinces the opportunity to determine, what the landscape of right to repair is going to look like for them. And I think this bill does that. I think this bill is reasonable. It has an approach that, as you say, Mr. Polyev, is fair. And I think that's, quite frankly, why we were able to achieve that unanimous support in the House.
Right. So there's nothing in the bill, for example, that would ban a vendor from including a clause in a warranty agreement that requires the buyer to bring the product in question back to the vendor for repair and maintenance. That would still be allowed under this bill, would it not?
Yeah, this bill does not get into the architecture of what a right to repair landscape is going to look like. This allows for that conversation to be had at the provincial level.
Right, and at the same time, if a vendor puts in place a technological protection that would attempt to prevent the consumer from repairing the product themselves, what this would do is say the consumer can try to get around that technological protection and repair at their own risk, and then it really becomes a decision for the customer on whether or not to respect the technological measure put in place by the vendor, or to try and find some way around it. Is that a fair characterization?
Yeah, this bill specifically carves out that exemption within the Copyright Act, so that breaking a TPM for the purposes of diagnosis, maintenance, and repair is not illegal
right.
in Canada.
But it doesn't, at the same time, it doesn't prevent vendors from putting in place those protections that keep customers from repairing the product.
Correct.
Yeah. And I think there's no perfect world here, but at the end of the day, what you've said is, I think what your bill does is it allows the customer to say, listen, this is the technological protection that the vendors put in place to prevent me from repairing my product. I can decide whether or not I want to buy it, given that it has that protection. or the vendor wants to put in place a requirement in warranty that I bring my tractor or smartphone back to him for repair, and I can look at that warranty agreement, and if I don't like it, I can go shop somewhere else. But at the end of the day, the government's not going to ban me from attempting to go around the vendor and repairing the product myself. That's sort of a summary of what effect this would have.
Yeah, it really touches on the fact that the Copyright Act has been used in a way that it was never intended. Right. So as you know, when we had a refrigerator, 20 years ago, and a compressor went on that refrigerator, you could fix it without having to break the Copyright Act. Now that compressor is attached to a motherboard that has a technological protection measure in it that doesn't even allow you to replace the part that has nothing to do with the technology side. And I think this is where time and the development of these smart devices has required a rethink. And look, the industries, they have figured out a way to use the Copyright Act to their benefit, but it was never intended that way.
No, in fact, and if I could conclude, I know I'm out of time, but I don't think this is copyright. I mean, if someone was trying to break into the machine to copy the intellectual property and create their own similar machine and sell it, stealing the IP of the vendor, that would be one thing. But what you're talking about here is just letting them to repair that machine. So I agree with you that the section you're removing never really belonged in the Copyright Act. So anyway, good work on your part. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Polyev. We'll now go to MP Johari. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome to my colleague, MP May. Welcome to our committee, and thank you for the great work that you're doing in your writing and on the legislative side. I was one of the fortunate MPs who managed to interview the bill when it was introduced in the House. And what I found interesting, and I would ask you to explore for us, was the saving that's associated with the cost of maintenance, the total cost of the equipment, and it's under the consumer through the right to repair legislation. Can you give the committee an estimate around the potential cost savings through this legislation?
Thank you for the question, MP Johari. I do not have specific data regarding savings on this. I think that it's a very good question. But it's a question that we, hopefully if we have other witnesses appear on this subject from industry, that might be able to better answer that question. I think that the obvious reality is that consumers make their choices based on a lot of different factors, but the number one choice they make is based on price and cost. And we know that if something is cheaper to replace than it is to fix, then we'd rather have the new one and goes, the other one goes out to the curb for the dump. And I think that's what we're seeing here is a system that allows the manufacturer of that device to control the cost of repair. And so it's in their interest to make that cost of repair so significant that somebody is consciously looking at the cost versus replace, or repair versus replace, and they're looking to replace it.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, and this is really goes to the next step of this bill, which is of course the environmental focus. But please.
Yeah, I just wanted to share with you, we're in our household, we're dealing with a dilemma. We have moved to our house about 22 years ago. The washer dryer that we've got is an older version, but we have the flexibility to be able to repair it because it's a lot of mechanical parts. We're looking to replace it with a newer model, which is enhanced electronically, and it helps us with more energy efficiency. But when we look at the warranty and we look at if we need to repair it, basically we have to either replace half of the machine, or we got to go look at the new one. So the cost saving is not only as it relates to the repair, but also relate to other efficiencies that you would be able to gain by upgrading to a newer model and being able to benefit from electrical efficiency, energy efficiency.
Yeah, I understand that. I think that there's research out there, and I'm afraid I don't have it at my fingertips, but there is research out there that shows that that's a bit of a misnomer in some cases, not in all cases. But we know that the energy that it requires to produce the new product is significant, and quite frankly, in Ontario, the efficiency of the energy that's produced that's provided to run that device has in fact become a lot better. And so they've shortened that gap as well. Yeah. So I think that the advantage of replacing something because it's more energy efficient definitely is a factor, but not nearly as much as the cost of a repair of that device.
Yeah, I just want to, you mentioned that this bill has taken some international attention. I'd really like to get your input around how would this bill affect our nation's compliance with the international treaties such as the CUSMA and the World Intellectual Property Organization, WIPO, Copyright Treaty, which provides protection on TPMs.
Yeah, and I thank you for that question. It's one that I've heard raised, but I haven't actually discovered what the challenge would in fact be. I know we've clearly have to do our due diligence and make sure that we're not in some kind of breach of a treaty or trade agreement. But I will point out that both the U.S., the EU, and other countries are in fact in the process of doing moving forward on legislation like this. In fact, in the EU, they're setting new standards for repairability and ensuring that packaging clearly marks where a product can or cannot be repaired. So again, that's further down the line when it comes to what the landscape will look like as per the provincial. Any further provincial measures and legislation and regulations that are passed. But this is happening, and I think we need to be prepared. And one of the ways we can be prepared is to eliminate the barrier of copyright so that the provinces can move forward appropriately.
Thank you, and that's my time.
Thank you very much. Our next 6-minute round goes to Député Lemire. Vous avez la parole.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. May, for this bill. And I supported it in the House and spoke in the House, and I really liked the question asked by Mr. Johari on the environmental issues. I think we could delve into this further. But when you talked about planned obsolescence, could you speak to this and how this act is being used by companies in their favor right now with regards to planned obsolescence?
Thank you very much for the question. I apologize. I will have to respond in English. My French, I'm working on it, but it is not nearly good enough to present here today. The environmental side of this was a huge motivator for me to want to move on this private members bill. Clearly, we will see less waste, less e-waste. As we allow for more items to be repaired. We see a huge growing desire for sort of the DIY culture. You can go on YouTube and learn how to fix almost anything. And I think that is something we want to instill in our culture. I know that I have 2 children. I teach them as much as I possibly can on how to, fix things and repair things on their own. It's not just the right thing to do from an environmental perspective, but it's a skill that we're potentially losing in our generations. But I think the question about planned obsolescence is one that we see this all the time. My mother-in-law has a washer dryer from the 60s, and it's still running perfectly fine. She had to replace a fan belt on one of them a couple of years ago, and it's running perfectly fine. We don't see that anymore. We see devices that are designed to ultimately fail. And that's a choice from a manufacturing perspective, but it's also been driven by consumers. And I think we have to recognize this is something, again, won't be solved by this private members bill, but potentially provincial legislation and regulation around providing requiring manufacturers to provide parts or manuals or things like that in order to repair some of these devices. I think that we need to look at that a little bit deeper in terms of how we move forward. But I agree with you, sir. The idea of planned obsolescence is a challenge, but it won't be solved by this bill.
On voit que c'est une question qui vous
I see that this is something that you take to heart. On the cost side, there's always an environmental cost if you don't do anything. Have you measured how much it costs us in garbage? And with this bill, if we were able to repair, for example, a washer or dryer or other electronic equipment, how much public monies would be saved rather than sending all of this to landfill sites or to recycling centers? In the United States, for example, if we follow the work that was done in the past.
Again, the other question we had about the actual costs associated with this, I would have to defer to industry experts, which I hope you will call to witness on this bill. But I just common sense would suggest that it would be significant. We know that waste and waste management is a, if not the biggest challenge for our municipalities and regions, it's up there. And we know that the cost is significant. We're looking at this from an environmental perspective. We're looking at this from a consumer rights perspective, but we also need to look at this in terms of an affordability perspective, in terms of what Canadians are spending their money on, and if they're not spending it on a new appliance, what then could they do? Could they pay down their debt? Could they, save for retirement? Could they put help their kids through school? There's a whole bunch of other aspects to this, a ripple effect that could result. And I'm excited by, what is to come. Hopefully, this bill does have enough runway to see royal assent. Maybe not, but again, given that it was unanimously supported in the House, maybe the minister may choose to pick it up as well.
La balle est dans le camp du gouvernement là-dessus sur les élections.
The ball is in the government's court with regards to elections, but you say that C-272 is a precursor. What other act could be amended also to ensure longer life for our products? And you said that there are many bills in the past that might not have been passed, but what was your inspiration with regards to bills that were passed or maybe that weren't passed?
So I think there's, if I'm understanding your question, there's a number of things that have been attempted in the past, but this issue of copyright would still have been a barrier. It would still have been illegal for those pieces of legislation to pass. I think in terms of why, what was the motivation? Quite frankly, seeing my children growing up in a more digitized world and seeing the need for this growing every single year. And I see my time.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you.
Our next round of questions goes to MP Massey. You have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. May, for your work here on this bill. We support as New Democrats. In fact, we would go much farther. In fact, in 2009, my private member's bill passed in the House 247 to 18 on the automotive aftermarket, and it's now a voluntary agreement. The then Minister Clement, was able to work with the industry, being the automotive sector and the aftermarket, and that agreement actually needs to be updated as well too. So, what would you suggest in terms of this bill here too that would advance? I guess it's not just the rights for consumers, the environment you noticed as well too. Consumer protectionism is there. But what would you suggest would be your message to all those innovators out there that once you purchase a product and you understand the warranty, and if you actually do undermine the warranty, but still you don't become a criminal for actually purchasing a product and then adapting it or changing it or improving it or innovating it, I think this is a key point that we shouldn't be lost.
Thank you, MP Massey. I agree with you. I think that there is a real potential to open up a lot of different industries with a proper right to repair legislation, and thank you for the work that you've done in the past. I along with MP Longfield, chair the Auto Caucus on the Liberal side, and we've talked a lot about the auto industry in relation to right to repair, and you're absolutely correct. It was a voluntary agreement. It's worked well. It's not perfect. There's a number of holes in it, but it has, and it definitely needs to be updated. We're seeing companies like Tesla, of course, not following that voluntary agreement. A lot of companies like Volkswagen and Mercedes-Benz don't follow that agreement. And we can use the auto industry though for those that are concerned, in terms of stakeholders that might be harmed by something like this. It clearly has not harmed the auto industry. And what it has done is it's spun off a whole bunch of other options, whether it's independent mechanics, parts providers, service providers, and I think this could be what you would see in a right to repair for digital devices. I think that you would absolutely see that space starting to fill, and making sure that the people have those choices and options.
It's important to recognize your focus to some degree on electronic waste, something that we haven't been doing the best job of, as our landfills and other types of disposal systems aren't as robust as they probably should be in the market. And interesting to the auto sector is, we think about the environment and we think about the rights and all those things, but also there was a public safety issue too, because vehicles would be on the road and not be in the best condition traveling to waiting for repairs and so forth, so it gets complex. But with regards to electronic waste, and going back to that point, can you indicate whether you've had some discussions or with third-party groups on that? And I know that some of this is municipal because that's where some of it ends up, but has there been any work done on that part of the program and platform yet?
With regard to electronic waste?
Yes, and kind of measuring what could be improved upon or reduced. Has there been any third parties that have jumped to your quarters just yet? It's a little bit early still, but I'm just wondering whether or not some groups have kind of latched on.
We've had a number of stakeholders reach out to us, virtually the entirety of which have been supportive of this bill. A lot of them around the environmental components of this and the reduction of waste in landfills. We know that a lot of incubators or groups that are trying to figure out new ways to do things are working on this kind of stuff. In fact, just down the street from where I am right now is a brand new incubator called Grand River Innovation, and their almost entire focus is on dealing with the what they call the new waste. People are throwing out, for the first time, a large flat screen TV. So how does the industry break that down? How do they separate the precious metals versus the recyclables to things that have to go in landfill? This is what the work that they're trying to work on right now. Things like batteries, technology designed to sort and recycle small batteries. These are all things that I've talked to different groups on in terms of what they're working on. What this bill is going to attempt to do is reduce the incredible load of waste that is heading their way, and trying to manage that. This, of course, is going to be driven by the consumer. But again, it comes down to cost. If something is cheaper to repair than it is to replace, people will likely make that choice.
Well, thank you very much for your work on this. It's appreciated. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now start our second round of questions. Our first round goes to Député Généreux.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Merci, mon collègue.
Thank you, and thank you to my colleague that's applauding me. I'm not sure why, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. May, for being here today. We're mainly talking about obsolescence, planned obsolescence. We talked about the environment and things like this, and this has an impact. Will your bill allow for the reduction of material that might have a longer lifespan? Could you extend the lifespan of products? And this will also help the environment if people can keep products for a longer period of time. When objects become obsolete because of rules that make it so that people don't want to repair products, but rather, instead of keeping products and repairing them, they're thrown away and discarded. And so this does not help the environment, of course. So does your bill have any impact on this?
So thank you very much for the question. As I said earlier in a previous question, no, my bill does not, in fact, do that. What it is the first step that could lead to that type of legislation, that could allow the provinces to move forward with different regulations around manufacturing, part availability, manual access to different manuals. That doesn't get affected by this bill. That would be an overreach with this private member's bill. What this bill simply does is allow for a circumvention of the TPMs around diagnosis, maintenance, and repair. And so with that, it opens up, and of course I agree with you. The outcome that we would like to see as a result of this private members bill could in fact be those things that you discussed. But this bill specifically does not snap your fingers and make that all happen. That would all be up to the different jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions, to determine for themselves what that right to repair landscape is going to look like.
Avec les ententes, on sait qu'on a des 50 traités de libre-échange.
We know that we have free trade agreements throughout the world. Is there any direct or indirect impact stemming from your bill on these agreements? And another thing that concerns me, this is a private member's bill used to change or to improve rules. Why is this not a government-led bill?
To answer your first question, I have heard this concern that it could have an impact on trade agreements, but I have yet to see how it would impact trade agreements. There would definitely need to be a look at see how that, but there's been nobody has shown me to say here, here's a line within CUSMA, for example, that this would be problematic for. And that's why I'm open to amendments to make sure that that is not a barrier to this bill moving forward. The second part of your question, I don't speak for the minister. I've said in earlier remarks that, if this bill can't move forward because it doesn't have the runway to go through the process before the next election, the next best option is that the ministry pick it up and move it. No, I can't speak for the minister as to why this hasn't been done previously.
Ça va être tout pour moi, Madame la Présidente.
That's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Beaucoup. Normalement, vous me chicanez parce que je vous coupe, mais là, vous avez laissé un peu.
You left a little bit of time on the table. Madam Chair, I have a lot of respect for you. I'm not going to cut into you like Mr. Poilievre. No, I'm just joking.
Move to the next round of questions. Our next round goes to MP Assassi. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to Mr. May. You have done a magnificent job on this bill. I know that you care deeply about changing the repair landscape and that you've always championed consumer rights. Now, just to put this in perspective, as I understand it, this will be hugely transformative for the agricultural sector as well. Could you provide us with a few examples so everyone understands the implications of your bill and how it will assist individuals in the agricultural sector?
I really appreciate that question. This is something that was, again, one of the reasons we moved forward with this bill. I am the member of Parliament for Cambridge, and I'm seen by many as an urban member of Parliament. But in reality, if you look at my riding map, like 70% of my riding is actually rural. And this is a really big issue with the farmers in my community and across Canada, and we've heard from many of them who, as time has gone by and they've replaced certain pieces of equipment, been replaced with equipment that has these digital components in it, and as a result, they can't so much as replace a tire on a combine because there's a sensor in that tire that is connected to the motherboard, that is connected to the GPS, that identifies that there's a problem with that tire, and the culture and I'm one generation away from being born on a farm, and I can tell you the culture is to fix your own stuff. It is not just a point of pride for the agricultural sector. It's a necessity. There's a lot of people who are in rural communities, not like Cambridge, that are close enough to urban centers. They can maybe drive or get a technician to come out to the farm easily. But there's a lot of our farmers across Canada that don't have access to technicians to come out, and they need to be able to fix their own stuff. And I've read stories and seen articles and talked to farmers about, having to put tractors on trains to send them away to be repaired. And that is not only incredibly expensive for farmers, but it is debilitating in our ability to produce the food that we need for this country. And I know that there was a push in the United States, specifically towards John Deere, to identify and provide a way around these TPMs for farmers. And they put on a push with the lobby effort to against the legislation, and agreed to a voluntary measure. Now that measure was supposed to be provided by John Deere on January 2021, and we have yet to see that measure in place. So, voluntary agreements are great if they are done. Historically, historically it's not been the case in this industry. And I think that as we move forward, these everything from combines to, simple tractors and other devices, they're all connected in some way, shape, or form to these technological protection measures. And there is nothing about copyright that would be infringed for a farmer to be able to replace a tire on a combine.
Absolutely. So, given some of the expressions of concern that we've heard and you alluded to, which essentially relates to our obligations under CUMSA or under WIPO, for all those people who are flagging that specific concern, how do we insulate against retaliatory action under these agreements? Is there anything we could do to mitigate that risk?
So I see I amount of answer that question. Again, I would defer to, if you're going to have departmental officials come to speak to this bill at some point in the future, that's a question that I would pose to them. I have yet to see where in CUSMA or any of the agreements this would be a problem. I know, like I said, I agree with the department. We need to make sure we're doing our due diligence on this, but it would be up to the department to be able to give that information. I personally have not seen where that issue would be.
Thank you very much. We will now go to Député Lemire. Vous avez la parole pour 2 minutes et demie.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Monsieur.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. May, from the onset, you spoke to 4 or 5 elements that could have an impact with regards to legislation in the provinces. How can we not be having an impact on different jurisdictions? If I think of the Office of the Consumer Affairs in Quebec, have you contacted them?
No, again, I haven't spoken directly to the individual provinces about this. This is not about creating a bill that the provinces will have to adhere to. This is about removing a roadblock for that the provinces currently have enabled that they doesn't allow them to move forward if they so choose. They don't have to, but if they so choose, they can move forward on legislation or regulations around consumer protection, around the right to repair, because the technological protection measures exist within the Copyright Act. Anything that the provinces do until that is changed would run up against those legal challenges, and all this bill is trying to do is remove that barrier in order for the provinces to be able to make those choices. Now, what choices they do make. I know that there have been there was a private member's bill or a piece of legislation that was moving by a former Liberal member of Parliament here in Ontario that failed. And one of the reasons it failed or was challenged was because the technological protection measures within copyright still existed. So I think my motivation, my hope is that the provinces see this as an opportunity to be able to move forward, to be able to recognize the benefits to their citizens by creating that regulation or legislation around the right to repair.
Parlant de lever les obstacles, est-ce que vous pensez qu'il peut y avoir une opportunité?
When we talk about removing obstacles, do you think there would be possibilities for business development so that machine repair could be expanded? For example, Apple, you have to go to the company. Do you think this can create opportunities in the regions for repair businesses?
Very quickly, yes.
Merci.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Massey. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Madam Chair, go ahead and answer that question, Mr. May. I really don't have any more questions, but I'll give you an opportunity to finish the last one. That was a good question by my colleague. Yeah. So.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. I think that you brought up Apple, and this is probably one of the biggest targets with things like this. You can't you can't replace even a screen on something like this, even if the part is available and the person has the know-how. You don't have the ability to do that. They're very pernicious in how they've set up some of these systems, not just the TPMs, but the requirements for things like passwords and tools that will unlock a device in order for the repair to even be done. I'll give you an example of PlayStation. Right. So PlayStation has two major components to it. It has the disk drive and it has the motherboard. Now, if the disk drive were to fail for some reason, and you're able to take a disk drive from another PlayStation that maybe has another problem with it, or able to find that part online somewhere, and you have the know-how to replace that part in the PlayStation, the motherboard will not recognize the perfectly fine working a disk drive because the serial numbers will not match up. That has nothing to do with privacy, or that has nothing to do with copyright, I should say. And so these are the types of things that manufacturers have done using copyright legislation as a shield. And even if you have the know-how, the parts at hand, you still cannot get that device to function because of the way they have set that up to not allow for it to work.
As a PlayStation gamer, I really appreciate that example. It's actually perfect. It's a really good example. Thank you.
Well, it's one of those things where this. I think people across Canada, when they're starting to learn about right to repair, they're thinking about their own examples. They're thinking about, oh yeah, I had to do this or I had to do that, and this was a pain in the butt, and this cost me a fortune to have a guy come out to do something I could have done myself. And I think this is where this is getting that broad appeal because everybody has an example like that.
Thank you very much. Our next round of questions will go to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP May, for bringing this very timely legislation to us. Of course, my relaxation is driving a tractor, so I'm quite familiar with the significance of what is being asked, and of course, when you take a look at things like your DEF emissions control modules, when they start to go down, it's not like an air conditioner where maybe you could open the windows. That shuts it down. So and you only have a small time frame where you can actually do the work that you require. And one of the examples that I had was from a constituent. They have about a 1,200 acre farm around Olds, and quite frankly, their average repair costs are probably $75,000 a year, and of course that's not all related to the types of things that you're discussing, but it does show the significance of the cost of repairs, and I think that really becomes a critical aspect of it. But the thing that we depend upon, of course, are the great repair shops that we have in our communities, where they can basically, whenever you have trouble, they know how to fix it. And so this becomes one of those issues that I think we really have to pay attention to. But one of the things we've heard, of course, is from equipment dealers and manufacturers in the past, and they've said that the right to repair argument is more about demanding the right to make these illegal modifications to farm equipment. So I'm just wondering if you can, because no doubt we're going to hear a lot about that issue. So I wonder if you could just speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, and I've heard this argument as well, and I think we have to recognize where this argument is coming from. And I think that the idea that somebody is going to modify a piece of equipment that would be dangerous or inappropriate, I think is not realistic. I think we've seen this within the auto industry. I think people that are going to repair something, and want to repair something, they either have the skill to do it or they don't. And if they don't, they take it to somebody who does. And what this bill will do it will allow that consumer to choose where they take that device or piece of equipment to be repaired, right? It allows for them to not have to necessarily go to a one single source person who can set the price and there's nothing you can do about it. And we look at the auto industry as an example. I have the comfort level to replace oil in my car. And not anymore, but I used to be able to feel comfortable, going as far as replacing the brakes. But if all of a sudden the transmission goes, I'm not going to take that thing apart and try to fix it myself. I'm going to take that to somebody who is trained and has the know-how to do that. I think we have the comments about, it's going to lead to this or it's going to lead to that is really disrespectful to the average consumer who clearly doesn't want to take on a project, something that would either be harmful to them or potentially destroy the piece of equipment that they have.
And I think too, though, one of the questions, of course, if you happen to have a particular brand of a combine, but you wanted to put a different header on it, I think that's where some of these other companies are saying, you know what, we have a great product as well, but we're going to have a little bit of difficulty being able to link up there, or potentially have a problem linking up with this product that we would like to be able to sell. And I think that really becomes one of the issues, that the people in the ag arena speak about. One of the other things, though, that you spoke about was the environmental aspects of it, and the fact that when things become obsolete or the planned obsolescence, these things have to be dealt with. And if you can keep them out of landfills, well, that's important. I guess I have a little different idea as far as landfill. I look at all of the solar panels, that waste that we're going to have, and everything else as we work in certain directions. I think it's important that we do a full life cycle analysis of all of the products that we're going to be producing, no matter what the scenario. And the fact that you are addressing that is important. So I appreciate that. I don't know if I have enough time to have you quickly comment on that, but I'd appreciate that.
I'm not sure that I have the time. Madam Chair's got the red tag up there, but I will say, that's again beyond this bill. That'll be future legislation. This is simply removing that barrier.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our last round will go to MP Lambropoulos. You have the floor.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thank you, MP May, for bringing forward this legislation, and happy we're discussing it here. I think it's great because a lot of middle-class Canadians and people can't necessarily afford to replace things necessarily, or to go back to the company to get it fixed at the expensive rates at which that might be. So I think it's great that you're doing this, and that I hope it does get unanimous consent going forward, that it gets full support going forward. I do have questions, though. I know that some companies purposely create these barriers and make it so that certain technologies get outdated, right? So I know that cell phones, for example, iPhones, every couple of years they changed the technology and the software so that you can no longer use the same charger, or so that you could no longer, when you update your phone, it just slows down and eventually phases out. Do you think that this is going to have an impact on how companies moving forward will continue to do this, or will they try to make it even more difficult for people to be able to repair things on their own?
I think it's a good question, but I think this is the difference between the idea of the philosophy of manufacturing in general. We are simply saying with this bill that you have the right. It's no longer against the law to circumvent a TPM in order to repair, replace, or diagnose a situation. What you're talking about and what others have talked about today in terms of that sort of planned obsolescence, these are business decisions, and consumers are also going to look at, okay, I can effectively, replace the part in my phone or replace the part in this device or that device, but this device has got this new innovation, and I want that. Right. And so that always is a contributing factor in that consumer decision. And this isn't going to slow that down at all. Industry is going to continue to innovate, continue to bring out new products with more conveniences. I personally don't really find that kind of thing. My lawnmower, for example, has literally nothing on it that is a perk, if you will. But you almost have to go searching for something like that now, something that's basic, that someone like myself can repair on their own. There are so many little features that industry are adding to products to make life easier, to add more convenience to this device or that device. The whole smart concept, the whole 5G connecting everything, the fact that your toaster is going to be 5G in the future. Refrigerators already have that kind of capacity to say, when you're out of milk and things like that. We have to recognize that type of innovation is not going to slow down just simply because somebody has the right to repair their own device. What we are looking at really is for industry to acknowledge that using the Copyright Act is simply not the way to do this. I mean, if provinces want industry to be protected in that way, fine. They need to pass a law to say that, not simply use the Copyright Act as that shield in a way that it was never intended to.
Thank you. No further questions.
Well, thank you so much, MP May, for being with us today. I think this is incredibly important legislation, and we are looking forward to hearing more about it when we resume in the fall. And I want to thank you for being here today and being very clear on the need. It is obvious that this is something that consumers need and consumers want, and given environmental concerns, given concerns of pricing, I think this is a really good idea. So with that, we will suspend momentarily while we allow the next panel to join and do some sound checks, and we will allow Mr. May to leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, everybody.